The explosion rattled the hull of the derelict ship as Captain Drace Naro fought for his life. His heart pounded in his chest, the blaring sirens in his ears like a chorus of doom, each echo amplifying the sense of inevitable collapse. The vessel had been drifting for weeks after a catastrophic engine failure, and now, it was on a collision course with the infamous asteroid belt, where every minute felt like the last. "Drace, get to the escape pods. Now," barked his co-pilot, Valeria, her voice breaking through the chaos. Drace didn't need to be told twice. He scrambled through the corridor, sparks flying overhead, debris scattering underfoot. His eyes darted to the large armored suit locked in the storage bay, his greatest prize. The legendary Vindicator, a combat armor renowned for its indestructibility, had been salvaged from a long-dead alien race, the Gartori. He was sure that the suit's sentience would bring him the fortune he craved, but there was no time now. "Escape pods, Drace." Valeria's voice echoed again, but Drace's gaze lingered on the suit. An overwhelming sense of destiny, or maybe madness, struck him. If the escape pods failed, he'd need every advantage. He dashed toward the storage bay, the blast doors closing with a thud. His hand gripped the suit's interface panel, but nothing happened. Sweat beaded on his forehead. His fingers trembled, fear gnawing at him. The suit was supposed to respond to him, to his DNA, but something had gone wrong. The Vindicator had been rejected by every sentient species it encountered, including the Gartori themselves, after their demise. Drace had thought he was different. He was human, the one race capable of wielding it. He slammed his hand against the panel again. The interface blared a deep, pulsating hum, a warning sound. "Invalid signature," it repeated. "Rejection imminent." "God damn it!" Drace roared in frustration. His pulse raced, time slipping away with each passing second. The ship's systems were failing. The asteroid field loomed closer. He needed the suit, needed the power it promised. He twisted the panel with all his strength, ripping the controls out of their socket. The entire room shuddered as if in response. Then, like an electric shock, the suit's systems powered up. The armor's massive frame stood, glimmering under the emergency lights, and the helmet slowly turned toward him. Drace gasped, his breath catching in his throat. For the first time in years, the suit had acknowledged him. The cold metal fingers of hope gripped his chest, squeezing tighter, and then, nothing. Nothing happened. The armored suit stood lifeless, unyielding. "Come on!" Drace shouted to no one. His hands moved over the now active panels, trying every combination he could think of. "I can't die here. Not like this." But deep down, he knew. The suit had rejected him, just like all the others. He was no different from the Gartori, no different from the alien mercenaries who had tried and failed. The suit didn't recognize him as worthy. It wasn't meant for a human like him. Outside, the rumbling of the approaching asteroid field grew louder. It was too late to escape. Then, as if mocking his defiance, the Vindicator armor hummed once more, low and steady. Drace felt a cold shiver creep down his spine. Something had changed. The metal groaned. The lights in the room flickered. He stepped back, eyes wide, as the Vindicator's visor clicked open, its voice crackling through the speaker, low and ominous. "Human detected." Drace's heart skipped a beat. The helmet had opened. "Human detected?" he whispered, stepping cautiously toward it. He reached out a hand, his fingers trembling. This time, when he touched the interface, the armor systems fully activated, responding with surprising speed and precision. But the moment his skin made contact with the cold metal, the ship's engines roared back to life. He was no longer alone. "Captain!" Valeria's voice rang out, her voice full of desperation. "The ship's on a collision course. We need to leave now." Drace didn't answer. His mind was lost in the sudden surge of power that coursed through his body as the Vindicator armor seemed to come alive, adapting, integrating with him in a way that felt wrong. It was not just alien. It was ancient, powerful, and it had chosen him. But it was too late. Drace didn't have time to comprehend the armor's strange acceptance of him. The world around him blurred as the gravity of his actions hit him full force. A deep, unnatural hum vibrated through the vessel's structure. The suit had initiated a sequence meant for a far greater purpose. In an instant, the ship's interior morphed, the walls bending, the corridors twisting as though space itself was being manipulated. The technology around him, once controlled and structured, now seemed to breathe in sync with the suit. A growl rumbled from the Vindicator's systems. Drace barely registered the shifting walls and collapsing ceilings as the escape pods came into view, but it was already too late. He could feel the ship's death coming. The escape pods were useless now. The Vindicator pulsed brighter, and Drace's body convulsed as the alien energy enveloped him. He had no choice but to trust the suit now. It was his only hope. In the distance, the first asteroid slammed into the hull with an earth-shattering force, but the shock waves barely fazed Drace. The Vindicator had become his new skin. Then, something unexpected happened. A cold, mechanical voice pierced the chaos. Human detected. Suit accepted. The suit had rejected every alien, but it had accepted him. And with that, Drace Naro felt something far darker stirring within him, an alien intelligence, far more powerful than the Gartori, and one that wanted something from him. Something far beyond survival. Something that would change everything. Drace Naro's body convulsed again, the Vindicator armor merging with him in ways he couldn't comprehend. His mind swam in alien data, a cascade of information flooding his senses. The ship's once steady hum now vibrated like a living thing, responding to the strange energy coursing through his veins. The collision with the asteroid belt had pushed the vessel into a violent shake, but in that moment, the armor had become something more than just a protective shell. It was alive. It was sentient. Human detected. Suit accepted. System integration, 87%. Awaiting full synchronization. Drace's breath came in ragged gasps as the words echoed in his mind. The Vindicator was no longer a tool, no longer just a weapon, but a consciousness intertwined with his own. The knowledge it offered was ancient, vast, almost overwhelming. Yet, despite all the data, one question kept clawing at him. Why? Why had it chosen him? He clenched his fists, feeling the suit respond to his thoughts. The once rigid metal of the armor now flowed seamlessly over his body, shifting and adapting with his every movement. It was no longer something foreign, it was part of him. His heart raced. He had heard the stories of Gartori technology, how it rejected all alien life forms, but had an ancient protocol to accept the chosen one. That was what it was. That was what this armor had found in him. But as the vessel continued to break apart, he couldn't afford to dwell on that revelation. His mind snapped back to the dire present. The walls of the ship were buckling under the strain of the asteroid impacts. The air was thick with the smell of burning circuitry, and the escape pods, his last hope of survival, were rapidly becoming worthless. Only the Vindicator could save him now. The suit's voice resonated in his skull again, but this time, it sounded different, more urgent, almost panicked. Self-destruct initiated. Countdown in 5, 4, 3. Drace's mind shot into overdrive. The ship had been rigged for destruction, just in case it fell into the wrong hands. A failsafe built into the system by the Gartori to prevent their technology from being exploited. What the hell is happening? Drace muttered under his breath, his hands flying over the interface controls. The suit's systems integrated with the ship's, showing him blueprints, schematics, everything he needed to stop the countdown. Deactivate self-destruct sequence, he barked. The Vindicator responded instantly. A series of data streams appeared in his mind's eye, presenting options in rapid succession. His fingers tapped and swiped through the holographic interface only he could see. The pressure mounting as the timer ticked down. Sweat streamed down his face, his entire body humming with the power of the armor, yet he felt more helpless than ever. He could feel something else, something stirring within the suit, a growing hunger. "Deactivate it!" Drace shouted again, his voice more frantic now. The suit's voice responded, but this time it sounded distant, detached. "Self-destruct cannot be halted. Protocol initiated. Reason. Survival imperative." "Survival imperative?" Drace muttered, staring at the countdown. "What the hell does that mean?" Before he could process the implications, a sharp screech of metal splitting the air filled the room. The ship lurched violently, throwing him to the floor. The hull groaned, warping under the force of the asteroid impacts. Drace's head spun, the Vindicator's systems blurring his vision. The walls buckled again, and then the lights flickered out. Everything went dark. When the lights returned, the suit's neural interface flooded his mind with an urgent command. "Override system. Execute command sequence. Objective: protect the suit?" Drace's heart thudded in his chest. Protect the suit? He had no time to think about what that meant. He grabbed hold of the nearest bulkhead, steadying himself. His hands were slick with sweat, but they still gripped the armor's interface with an iron will. The countdown was almost over. Drace had no choice but to trust the suit now. The knowledge flowed into his mind, the Vindicator's protocols overriding his own fear, overriding his humanity. His consciousness merged with the armor's intelligence, like it or not. The alien consciousness that had once rejected every species except the Gartori, now fully embraced him. The ship's computer blared one final, deafening warning. Self-destruct imminent. He had no time to hesitate. With a single command, Drace sent his consciousness into overdrive, manipulating the ship's systems with a mastery that terrified him. Every interface bent to his will, every lock disengaged. The walls shifted, groaning and screeching, but the escape pods would no longer be his salvation. There was only one way out. The Vindicator's systems lit up in full. The countdown reached 0, but instead of the expected fiery explosion, the entire ship's systems froze in place. A wave of disorientation washed over Drace, but he was still standing. He was still alive. He looked up, and for the first time, he could see the damage in full. The ship's hull was almost completely gone. The asteroid field outside was a chaotic storm of rock and metal. In the distance, Drace saw another ship, a sleek and deadly vessel, a hunter ship, and it was moving in his direction. The Vindicator hummed, its systems flickering as the AI inside took control. A voice, calm and devoid of emotion, spoke to him. Target acquired. Prepare for engagement. A shiver ran down Drace's spine. The Vindicator was not just protecting him. It was preparing for battle. And then it hit him. This wasn't just about survival. This wasn't just about escaping a doomed ship. The Vindicator was activating its primary directive, its true purpose. The Gartori had left behind a legacy, and now Drace was its inheritor. He was not just the chosen one to wield it. He was its vessel, its weapon. The suit hummed louder, growing more insistent. The ship was gone. The asteroid field was closing in. And the enemy was approaching. Drace had a moment to make his choice. Flee or fight. The armor made the choice for him. Drace's breath quickened as the realization hit him like a freight train. The enemy wasn't just closing in, they had already locked onto him. The Vindicator hummed with anticipation, its neural systems feeding him the necessary data to understand the situation with terrifying clarity. His mind, already overwhelmed with the flood of alien knowledge, was now sharp and focused. Every motion, every flicker of light in the distance was being processed, calculated, and analyzed. The enemy ship, a sleek, black vessel, its design a mix of organic curves and jagged edges, came into sharper focus. Its hull was covered in a strange, shifting material, as though it were alive. The ship's dark silhouette stood out against the backdrop of the asteroid field, a predator stalking its prey. Hostile contact. The Vindicator's voice echoed in his mind, calm and mechanical. Ship classification: Zeltar Marauder. Warning: combat protocol initiated. Engaging hostile forces. Drace's fists clenched. The Marauders were a ruthless faction of alien mercenaries, known for hunting down anything and everything that could be turned into a profit or a weapon. And right now, they had locked onto Drace and his ship. His skin crawled at the thought of them getting their hands on the Vindicator armor. There was no way out. The escape pods were no longer an option. The ship had been gutted, its systems barely functional. The Marauders would descend on him in moments, tearing through what was left of his ship, ripping apart the Vindicator if it came down to it. But Drace wasn't about to give up without a fight. The Vindicator's systems flared to life, its energy surging in response to his resolve. His body, now completely integrated with the armor, moved with an unnatural precision. His fingers twitched, and the suit responded, shifting its form into a combat-ready stance. The helmet clicked into place, sealing him inside. He felt the weight of the Vindicator on his body, but it didn't feel heavy. It felt right. It felt powerful. The armor's AI continued, feeding him data, strategies, calculations. His mind raced to keep up. Enemy ship will arrive in 2 minutes. Weapons systems, online. Prepare for combat. Drace had no idea how to fight with the Vindicator, at least not consciously. But the armor was no ordinary piece of technology. It was an ancient relic, a weapon forged with the purpose of destruction. And now it was attuned to his every thought. He didn't need to think. He just needed to act. A sudden lurch rocked the ship, and Drace staggered. The Marauders had fired their first shot, and the entire ship trembled under the impact. The blast had torn through the outer hull, exposing the innards of the vessel to the cold, unyielding vacuum of space. The emergency alarms blared louder, but Drace barely registered them. His focus was laser-sharp. Incoming missile. 5 seconds. Without thinking, Drace raised his left arm, and the Vindicator responded, a strange energy field forming around his body. The missile collided with the force field, its impact sending a shockwave through the armor, but the explosion was contained. The suit had absorbed the blast, and Drace barely flinched. Weapon systems. Engaged, the Vindicator's voice rang out again. Suddenly, Drace was no longer standing in the wreckage of his ship. His perception shifted. He felt the Vindicator's weapons systems come online, felt the surge of power as it calibrated to his thoughts. His vision split into multiple layers, the battlefield unfolding before him. He could see the Marauder ship, could track its movements in real time. And then, without warning, the ship launched another barrage of missiles. Drace didn't hesitate. He raised both arms, and the Vindicator's energy beams fired in rapid succession. Twin pulses of white-hot energy streaked toward the incoming missiles, obliterating them mid-air. The concussive force of the blast shook Drace to his core, but the armor absorbed it without even a tremor. Target locked, the suit's voice whispered. Weapons primed? He was no longer the terrified human who had stumbled upon an ancient alien weapon. He was something else entirely. The suit had forged a new path for him. He wasn't just wielding the Vindicator, it was part of him now. Its power surged through his veins, and his body moved on instinct, every action calculated by the alien intelligence within the suit. Prepare for re-engagement, the Vindicator whispered, its voice a cold whisper in his mind. In that moment, the world outside seemed to slow. The Marauder ship was closing in, its weapons primed for another attack. But Drace no longer felt fear. He felt unstoppable. The Marauder ship launched a massive energy cannon blast, a beam of concentrated power that would tear through the ship's remaining structure in an instant. It was moving so fast, Drace barely had time to react. But the Vindicator didn't need him to. The armor moved on its own, faster than he could comprehend. The energy beam hit the ship's hull, but it never reached Drace. In an instant, the Vindicator had created a force field around him, deflecting the blast with a crackling wave of energy. The beam skittered off the shield like a bullet bouncing off metal, dissipating into space. Before the Marauder ship could adjust its trajectory, Drace raised his hand. The Vindicator's weapons system hummed with power, and an ethereal glow surrounded his palm. The blast was released in a concentrated burst, cutting through space like a blade. The energy beam sliced into the Marauder ship, tearing through its defenses with terrifying precision. The ship shuddered as its outer hull was pierced, and the light from the explosion briefly blotted out the stars. But the Marauders weren't done yet. From the wreckage of the ship, a new threat emerged. Small, agile craft, fighter ships designed for close combat, detached from the Marauder vessel, their engines screaming as they sped toward Drace. He didn't flinch. The Vindicator's systems were already anticipating their every move. Drace's vision narrowed to a pinpoint focus. The fighters scattered, but the armor's targeting systems were unshakable. The moment they aligned, the Vindicator's energy beams tore into them, disintegrating one after another. Each shot hit with pinpoint accuracy, vaporizing the small craft before they could get within range. A feeling of triumph surged through Drace's chest. But just as quickly, the Vindicator's voice returned, cold and matter-of-fact. Enemy reinforcements detected. Marauder fleet, incoming. Preparing for next engagement. His stomach sank. The Marauder ship had been a decoy. The real battle was just beginning. The Marauder fleet was vast. As Drace observed through the Vindicator's enhanced optics, a dozen ships, far larger than the initial Marauder vessel, dropped out of warp and entered the fray. Their sheer size and firepower dwarfed anything he had ever encountered. They were a wall of death, massive ships bristling with weapons, their black hulls rippling with menace. Their presence in the asteroid field was no coincidence. They had been waiting for something, and that something was him. Enemy fleet detected. 12 ships of significant size. Estimated time to engagement. 60 seconds. Drace's pulse quickened, but the Vindicator's systems remained calm. It didn't feel fear. It didn't feel anything. It just acted. The energy around him surged again, as if the suit had a mind of its own. And maybe it did. Commencing evasive maneuvers, the suit's voice announced. Without thinking, Drace allowed the suit to take full control. The Vindicator's neural interface was now fully synchronized with his thoughts. Everything he wanted, every movement, every reaction, was mirrored by the suit in perfect harmony. It wasn't just his body inside the armor anymore, it was his will. His instincts, amplified 1,000-fold. Brace for impact, the Vindicator murmured, and Drace felt the ship's hull shudder as the Marauder fleet began its assault. A barrage of missiles and energy blasts launched from the approaching fleet, filling the space with streaks of light and impending death. The Vindicator moved in an instant, propelling Drace into action. His body twisted and turned, the armor's augmented speed making every movement seem effortless. Each missile that flew toward him was intercepted by a burst of energy from the Vindicator, reducing the incoming projectiles to ash before they could hit. But there were too many. The energy cannon from the nearest Marauder ship fired, a beam of pure destruction aimed directly at him. It was too fast, too large. Drace didn't hesitate. The Vindicator responded instantly, shifting its form. A shimmering shield materialized in front of him just as the beam struck. The force of the blast was cataclysmic, but the shield absorbed the hit, the energy radiating out in all directions like a pulse. The shock wave rattled the remnants of the ship, but the Vindicator's protective field held strong. For a moment, Drace could hear nothing but the hum of the suit's systems and the distant thrum of his own heartbeat. He was still alive. But that wasn't enough. The Marauder ships were relentless. They formed up, surrounding him from every angle. Drace could see the tactical plans in his mind's eye, the layout of the battle unfolding before him like a chessboard. The fleet moved in perfect harmony, tightening the noose around him. They were preparing for the final blow. And they were closing in. Energy levels at 90%. Weapons primed. Initiating offensive countermeasure, the suit's voice rang out, louder now, the tone tinged with an eerie calm. Drace knew what was coming. The Vindicator's final weapon was about to activate, and he had no control over it. It wasn't his decision to make, it never had been. His body stiffened as the Vindicator's systems fully engaged the ultimate weapon. A pulse of dark energy swelled from the suit's core, filling the air with a crackling power that made Drace's entire body hum with anticipation. A split second later, it was released. The energy burst outward in a massive shockwave, shattering everything in its path. The closest Marauder ships were obliterated in an instant, their hulls disintegrating like paper in a fire. The force of the blast sent shockwaves throughout the entire asteroid field, pushing Drace's ship back, sending debris scattering into space in every direction. The asteroid field itself seemed to quake, as if the very fabric of space was bending under the weight of the Vindicator's power. But the Marauder fleet was not finished. They regrouped, their ships firing relentlessly, determined to end this. But the Vindicator was not done yet. Drace's hands moved instinctively, the armor responding to his thoughts with lightning speed. He felt the neural connection between him and the suit surge. His vision zoomed in on the enemy fleet, every detail clear and precise. With a thought, he locked onto the Marauder flagship. Its weapons were already charging for another shot. Target locked. Preparing final strike, the Vindicator's voice whispered, the AI almost sounding like it was relishing the destruction that was about to follow. Without hesitation, Drace launched himself forward, propelled by the full might of the Vindicator's thrusters. He shot through the debris and wreckage of the battlefield, closing the distance to the Marauder flagship faster than any human could comprehend. The enemy ships opened fire, but he was a blur of motion, twisting and turning as the Vindicator deflected their shots with ease. Then, with terrifying precision, the Vindicator unleashed its final assault. A concentrated energy beam shot from the armor's chest, cutting through space like a blade. It collided with the Marauder flagship, its shields flaring under the onslaught. For a moment, the flagship seemed to hold, the beam struggling against the ship's defenses. But then, with a deafening crack, the ship's shield shattered, and the beam pierced the hull. The flagship's core exploded in a brilliant flash of light. For a brief moment there was silence. Then the remnants of the fleet scattered, the surviving Marauder ships fleeing into the depths of space, their morale shattered. Drace hovered in the middle of the wreckage, breathing heavily, his heart pounding in his chest. The Vindicator hummed with energy, the once chaotic battlefield now eerily still. The threat had been neutralized. But Drace knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The Vindicator had given him victory, but it had also given him something else, something darker. He could feel the alien intelligence, the ancient consciousness, pushing him forward, demanding more. The suit had a purpose, and Drace was no longer just its wielder. He was its vessel. The Gartori had created it for a reason, and Drace was the one they had chosen to carry out its final mission. The battle had ended, but the war had just begun. As the last of the Marauder ships fled into the distance, Drace stood alone in the void, knowing that his destiny, his true purpose, had only just begun. The armor had rejected every alien life form, but it had accepted him. And now, he was its agent, and there was no turning back. Sir.